We begin with our big story. Former Special Counsel Robert Hur was in the hot seat today on Capitol Hill. Lawmakers from both parties grilled him about his report detailing his decision not to recommend charges against President Biden for mishandling classified documents. Hur testified before the House Judiciary Committee. He called his investigation thorough and independent, and he stood by his report, questioning the 81-year-old president's mental acuity because of his age. Republicans and Democrats pressed the former special counsel.
You understood when you made that decision, didn't you, Mr. Hur, that you would ignite a political firestorm with that language, didn't you?
Congressman, politics played no part whatsoever in my investigative steps.
But you understood nevertheless.
Once you gave the report to the White House,
yes,
they saw changes, asked for you to change some of the things you had in your report, namely the fact that the president's memory was not very good. You remember that?
Yes, sir.
Hur says he did not make any changes the White House requested. President Biden blasted the special counsel's report just hours after it was released last month. He defended his mental acuity, and he slammed Hur for claiming he couldn't recall when his son Beau died. But that claim is supported in a new released transcript of President Biden's testimony. The transcript also shows Biden repeatedly insisted he never meant to retain classified documents from his time as vice president. So let's bring in ABC News chief Washington correspondent and This Week co-anchor Jonathan Karl for more. Jonathan, this was just a strange spectacle. So Special Counsel Robert Hur, a prosecutor, says, I've investigated this case and I'm not bringing any charges against this man. But let me tell you all the bad things I learned about it. And by the way, I'm going to toss in my assessment of his mental acuity, too.
Well, it was a spectacle on multiple levels. First, for what you cite there, usually a prosecutor will investigate and make a decision whether or not to indict. And if a prosecutor decides not to indict, that's the end of it. There's no press conference held, unless you're James Comey back in 2016. It's done. But in this case, he is a special counsel, and a special counsel, under the rules that define what a special counsel is, must write a report, a final report, which is given to the Attorney General and then passed on to Congress. The Attorney General makes a decision about whether or not it's made public. So here you have it. No charges, but no exoneration either, because, as you said, it's a list of what President Biden did wrong. But it was a spectacle also because this hearing, Terry, did nothing to illuminate anything. There were no new facts that were brought out in the hearing. Hur made it clear from the start that he was there to talk about the report he had written, and the members, the Republicans and the Democrats, were using this clearly as a political forum. You even had the spectacle of them splicing together videotapes to make a point about the president's mental acuity and Donald Trump's mental acuity. Nobody seemed to be interested in learning anything new at all. It was just about scoring political points.
You know, and as you point out, John, not really about the basis of the investigation, which was the Biden's handling of classified information. Hur's report had raised questions about the president's age and his mental acuity. The White House has been trying to address those concerns. President Biden made that very energetic, kind of shouting State of the Union address. Now we've got Hur describing the moments of their encounter in the interview in his own words. How much damage did today do to Biden's effort to say, I'm not too old?
I don't know that it did any damage, any more damage than what's already out there. I mean, in the report itself, that one line which you heard about 25 times from Republicans today, roughly, that Biden is a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. That line has been repeated over and over and over again, and will be repeated over and over again going into the election. But look, people see who Biden is. They make a judgment for themselves. I don't think anybody is making a decision, a voter, whether or not Biden is too old or doesn't have what it takes based on what Robert Hur said in a hearing.
You know, John, one of the strange things about this election year is both the president of the United States and his his challenger, Donald Trump, have both been accused of mishandling classified information. Trump has been charged with crimes for doing that because of the nature of his conduct, the prosecutors say. But how much did today help Donald Trump in his basic defense, which is everybody does it and they're just trying to get me?
Well, it certainly helps him muddy the waters on that. Look, the cases are dramatically different, and Robert Hur makes it very clear in the report that the cases are dramatically different. There is a reason that Donald Trump has been charged with multiple crimes arising out of his handling of classified documents, and that Joe Biden has not been charged with a crime. It's not a double standard. It's because what Trump did is qualitatively different, and he also went at great lengths to obstruct justice and not to cooperate with investigators, not to cooperate with the government's efforts to get those documents back. These are very different cases, but Trump can say, wait a minute, he had classified documents, I had classified documents, and I'm the only guy that's charged.
Very different cases.
Very, very different cases, but politically he gets to go out there and make that case, and how many people are really into the details of just how different these cases are.
Great point. John Carl, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Terry.
Well, let's bring this big story to our panel now. Joining us today, ABC News contributor and Sirius XM radio host Mike Muse, ABC News political contributor and senior editor for The Dispatch, Sarah Isker, ABC News political contributor and former Democratic senator from North Dakota, Heidi Heitkamp, and former Republican congressman from New York, John Katko. Welcome all. Sarah, let me begin with you. You worked with Robert Hur during your time at the Department of Justice. What can you tell us about him, about what kind of prosecutor he is, and what do you make of his testimony today?
Well, for those of us who know Rob, this was actually not an unusual position for Rob to be in, meaning having both partisans on either side of the aisle really hate you. Rob Hur is now the only person to have worked on special counsel investigations into 2 sitting presidents, recommending no indictments against Donald Trump in the Mueller investigation, and then, of course, here in the Biden investigation. So it was very funny to see partisans on both sides try to score points, try to get Rob to agree with them. He's very practiced at this. It wasn't going to happen. And the idea that he was in this for some sort of judgeship under Donald Trump, believe me, Donald Trump doesn't like any of us who worked on the Mueller investigation. It ain't going to happen.
And that was, Heidi, one of the things that was raised today by one of the Democrats, that you're just looking for an appointment in the Biden administration, in the Trump administration, I should say. So what did you make of what happened today, the partisanship, and, you know, what do you think American people got out of this hearing today?
Shocking. The House held a hearing and no new facts came out and everybody grandstanded. That's about sums up the whole House of Representatives today. And, you know, the least favorable position to be in is special counsel when you haven't made anybody happy. And quite honestly, was it gratuitous? I guess we'll have to make a judgment. The special prosecutor basically says, I said those things because it added to my decision to decline to prosecute. I think he's a straight shooter. I think that this will be a day news story and then we're out.
Well, let me go to John on that. Special Counsel Hur, he was pressed by Republican Congressman Jim Jordan if he thought lawmakers should have access to the audio recordings he classified as, quote, valuable evidence for the investigation. In other words, he wants the country to hear what Hur heard, which is President Biden's struggle to remember sometimes. What do you think of that?
Well, as a former federal organized crime prosecutor, that'd be highly unusual to disclose evidence from an investigation to the general public. It's actually very unusual to make a statement like he made in this case. And I agree with Heidi that, you know, people won't remember much about this case after today, except, and we have to all admit this, a federal prosecutor made a decision, at least in part, not to prosecute the President of the United States because of his lack of mental acuity. That is devastating for Biden long term, and if that's not going to go away. But everything else, I agree with Heidi. It's probably not going to matter much what transpired today.
But no, Mike, if I can go to you, normal prosecutors don't come out and say, I'm not prosecuting. Here's the bad stuff I learned about the guy. And by the way, part of it was his mental acuity. They generally don't publish why they don't prosecute. They speak through indictments and court filings. And Hur defended his report. He addressed his criticism of Biden's memory. So how does all this fit, do you think, into the general elections people are thinking about voting?
A really great question. I love what Heidi and what John both said about this is pretty much a 24-hour news cycle in the sense of the response. But I think that this goes to the erosion of confidence that the American public has in our democracy and the functionality of our government. I do think that this is, as they head to the polls, they're headed to the polls not being elated, but more so being frustrated at the performative nature that is constantly seeing now within the halls of Congress and not being productive, in particular in the moment in the report that Hur released, where in the transcripts he mentioned the fact that President Biden had a photographic memory, but then when he released the special report, he talked about his memory loss. That just goes to the gamesmanship. Now, Hur stood fast on his defense on his report. He held his position and he held the line with that it wasn't based on partisanship. But I think the larger narrative out there is the erosion and the lack of confidence that the American people have forward in the operational aspect of Congress.
That's a great point there. The performative aspect we're well used to. We'd like to see them get some stuff done for the country, probably. Mike, Sarah, Heidi, and John, thanks. We'll get back to you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.